Hello, everybody. Welcome into the Fantasy Pros Football Podcast. I'm Ryan Wormeli, joined today by a couple of guys who are not dressed as they usually are. It's Andrew Erickson as...
I'm the Dolphins head coach. Give the ball to H.M. We got Tua back. Let's go. Let's go Dolphins.
Remember, we do have an audio-only audience, so I want to. You need to actually say it out loud and not just trust people to know your costume, which does look great, by the way, Erickson. He is rocking the Mike McDaniel offense here, for Halloween. Fitz, who are you?
I'm Dan Quinn, coming off a big game. Didn't play our greatest game against the Bears last week, but pulled off a pretty big play at the end. So floating on clouds right now.
Favorite to win the Coach of the Year, Dan Quinn. Congrats to you.
Really, ahead of Matt LaFleur and the
you are in first place.
Play calling wizardry that he has overseen.
Yeah,
Dan Quinn's coaching extends as far as he's lucky enough to have Jaden Daniels be an MVP candidate as a rookie. He's been good. I don't want to disparage Dan Quinn. He's been good, but I think LaFleur's been more impressive.
Yeah.
I would agree with you.
Quinn's doing a terrific job, though. The Commanders are one of the funnest stories in the NFL this season, without question.
It is Halloween, of course. That's why we are dressed up. I'm rocking the closest thing I have to Sean McVay. I don't really own any costumes or anything, but it's a hoodie that has that coloring, and I've got the hair and facial hair for it. So I figured that's what I'd go with. I did not get the headset rocking like you two did, so you guys definitely both look more like coaches than I do, and I respect it.
Well, because you didn't show up with the headset, you got to give us the coach speak. What are you expecting? Kyron Williams, is it going to be a split with Blake Corum? Is Puka going to play? Snap count? What do you think? What do you think, Sean McVay? What's going on, Coach?
Guys, I'm not good at impressions. I can't do it. I'm also kind of sick. Guys, I really think Cam Akers is going to be huge this year. I want to trade back for him and give him the workout here. I fully recognize I have no ability to impersonate anybody. So that's not me thinking I have a good Sean McVay impression. Just that I've been told on occasion that I kind of look like him when I wear this sweatshirt. So that's what I'm going with. That's my best impression. Do you have a Mike McDaniel for us, Erickson?
I do not have a Mike McDaniel. It's just,
I
don't know. Does he? He's really smart. He's a smart guy, smarter than I am. So I don't know. I guess my impersonation would be. You could deny vaping on the sideline during a game. I could do that. I could talk about how I spent 2 weeks in the bunker devising ways to get Jonnu Smith the ball over a 2-week stretch period. So that's about it, though, for my impersonations of Mr. Mike McDaniel.
We can't really have Fitz
I continuously get owned by the Bills, including this week, most likely.
We cannot really have Fitz do an impression of Dan Quinn because we would have to bleep out every other word. That dude is so
you could just start throwing your headset all over the place like you did after the Hail Mary. Like, oh!
We're having some fun. Like I said, we are recording this obviously Thursday morning, so it is Halloween. Happy Halloween to everybody who is listening and watching, and hopefully this weekend's slate of games is full of treats more than tricks for your fantasy teams. This is our start sit show. We're going to go through our favorite starts of the week, sits, waiver ads. Are we starting or sitting them? Some touchdown calls at the end of the show. It's our weekly Thursday show. And a quick reminder for everyone, all of our weekly consensus rankings and tiers can be found at fantasypros.com/rankings. One last Halloween related thing, guys, before we jump in. We've been doing this kind of internal at work candy bracket over the last couple of days, kind of put together by HR and some of our coworkers. We're, I think, going into the championship today. Who is your guys' one of candy? And I'm going to say, I don't know if you're going to pick this, but I'm going to take Reese's Peanut Butter Cups out of the equation because I think that is most people's 1-1. And so just for the sake of mixing it up, if that was going to be your 1-1, let's pick something else. Erickson, what do you got?
You can't put me on the spot like that when you take away the answer that I want to give.
I know. I'm trying to make it tricky.
I like to be right, not try to diversify. So I'm sorry. I'm just going with Reese's Peanut Butter Cup. I can give you my last ranking.
Completely ignoring the prompt.
I can give you the 000, which is dots. The worst candy ever made.
I'm not a dots. You know who tweeted this morning what his 1-1 is Debro, and he said candy corn. So I thought that's what you were going to say for your 0-0. I think candy corn gets a bad rap sometimes, but it's closer to round 14 than it is to a round 1 pick, in my opinion. Fitz, what about you?
Yeah, I agree with that. I like candy corn, but it is not the 101. So I'll go with Kit Kat. Recess would certainly be in the conversation. Twix would be in the conversation. And one that got short shrift and got blown out in the first round in our competition, I love Whoppers. I'm a big Whoppers guy, and Whoppers got completely
Whoppers are very
busted.
divisive.
Whoppers are divisive. My wife is like, "What are you doing with Whoppers?" She thinks Whoppers are just horrible.
The kids can bring in all the Whoppers. They're like, "Oh, baby, come to me, come to daddy, let's go."
And the great thing is my kids did not like Whoppers. So when they were of trick-or-treating age, I was coming in and hoovering up all the Whoppers, baby.
I quite like candy, but I'm pretty specific in the candy I like. I don't do sour candies. I don't really love fruit candies that much either. Like I don't hate Skittles or like Jolly Ranchers or whatever, but like they're not my favorite. And I also don't like caramel. So Snickers, Milky Way, Twix, like those are all pretty much ruled out for me. My tier one is Reese's Peanut Butter Cups and Kit Kats. So since those are both mentioned, I'll name the top of my tier 2, which is M&M's, and I'll take any variety. Peanut M&M's, the like, crispy M&M's, the peanut butter M&M's, regular mini M&M's are great. They're just a classic, and I don't think they get enough hype for like when I was trick-or-treating, M&M's, that was a top 3 candy you could put in my bag. I was really thrilled if I got any kind of M&M's. So they just got eliminated actually in our bracket. So we'll see how that wraps up. But you have to do candy talk on Halloween, right? So let's jump in. Speaking of adding candy to your bucket, how about some adding players to your off the waiver wire? That was a rough transition, but we're going to power through. Are we starting or sitting these waiver wire ads in week 9? There weren't a ton of options. I didn't feel like there were really any good running back options to even pick this week. Everybody was either too largely rostered already or just somebody that like is really more of a backup like stash guy. So I went away from any running backs in this section. We're going to start with a couple of receivers here. Cedric Tillman, the clear top option here. He is the Reese's Peanut Butter Cup of the week 9 waiver wire, in my opinion. Fitz, you do the waiver wire show. What was your approach to adding Tillman this week? I've been really excited to add him everywhere. And are you starting him in week 9?
Oh, you mean my flag plant player from last week who had 99 yards and 2 touchdowns? Yes. So I am starting Cedric Tillman in a couple of leagues this week. I did pick him up, spent pretty aggressively with Fab in a couple of leagues. So for this week, the good news is that, things have gone swimmingly for Tillman lately the last couple of weeks. And last week in Jameis Winston's first start of the season, 799 and 2. Great stat line. But the matchup against the Chargers isn't that great. The Chargers have allowed the 3rd fewest fantasy points and 3rd fewest receiving yards to wide receivers. And the Chargers are just really good at uglying up games. I'm a little worried about that, but we do know that Jameis Winston is going to throw aggressively downfield. The only thing is that Tillman's got to share targets with Elijah Moore, Jerry Jeudy. Those guys are getting targets too. And of course, David Njoku, who is at least the equal of the wide receivers in this offense. So I've got Tillman wide receiver 32. I think in most normal size leagues, he is a wide receiver 3 or flex play.
I don't want to be like a prisoner of the moment and just overreacting to, he had the best game of the bunch. He didn't even lead the team in targets in this last week, but I was in the stadium. I was in Cleveland for that game. Disappointing finish for me. I thought Tillman looked like the most legitimate star receiver of the bunch. Like in just the eye test alone, I felt like he was the guy that looked most like an alpha. He was the guy that looked most like I could see 2 months from now sitting here and calling him a league winner. I was like so thoroughly impressed by Tillman, by his connection with Winston. Now it was a banged up Ravens secondary. I kind of expected the Browns to throw, all over the Ravens defense in this one, and they did. But I just thought Tillman looked like genuinely like a star, honestly.
He's physically imposing for sure.
Very much so. I've seen some people kind of throw out the comp to like maybe, the next Nico Collins as like this kind of physical specimen who takes a couple years and then gets the right quarterback, except in this case, the right quarterback isn't Stroud, it's Jameis Winston, which is fun. Erickson, what are you doing with Tillman this week?
I think he's a wide receiver 3. I have him ranked pretty close to where Fitz has him at wide receiver 35. I think you just need to be aware that last week is probably not going to be a repeat performance this week. Last week, it was kind of the perfect storm. 45 pass attempts for Jameis Winston against a banged up secondary that they knew they had to throw the ball on. This Chargers game screams much more of a kind of a grosser game playing against a Chargers team that likes to run the football. You could see the Browns maybe leaning on the run a little bit more. You look at the Chargers defense. I think it's a little bit weaker against the run than the pass. They don't really stack the box. They don't really try to stop the run. So I think maybe you could see a little bit more Nick Chubb. So I don't think that he's I still think he's a wide receiver 3 because he's good. And I think that you're going to see probably a more dramatic fall off with the Jerry Judys, the Elijah Moores of the world. And I still think that Njoku's probably still like the number one overall in terms of targets in this offense, but I think he's an okay start. I just wouldn't expect him to get, 100 receiving yards and 2 touchdowns again.
Do you agree with that last point, Fitz, that Njoku's number one ahead of these receivers?
I kind of do. Yeah. I mean, I like Njoku is a must start. Absolutely. Now. And it's funny because he was borderline unusable earlier in the season.
Just like last year. You couldn't use him at the beginning of the year, and then he just went on they got rid of Watson, and then he just went on a tear. He's doing it again.
Crazy.
Yeah, I guess like I would put Tillman as like he's a guy. If I have him on my roster, I'm looking for a way to start him this week, but I am managing expectations. Sure. Like I'm certainly not expecting almost 100 yards and 2 touchdowns again. Another receiver, a young guy, rookie, Keon Coleman. Fitz, this is somebody we talked a lot about on the Dynasty Show in the offseason. Now seeing him kind of starting to put it together a bit more in this Bills offense. They did add Amari Cooper, so it's not like he's the only target option anymore. Khalil Shakir obviously playing well too. But again, rookie receivers in the second half of their rookie season, that's just a profile I want to go after as much as I possibly can. So if you added Coleman this week, are you starting him in week 9?
Borderline. And it's fun that we're getting to see this guy start to shine. Like his ball skills are just freaky good. I've got him at wide receiver 36 this week. He's just got a very wide range of outcomes. We just can't count on a lot of targets for him when he is sharing with Amari Cooper, Khalil Shakir, Dalton Kincaid, James Cook, and we've got an offensive coordinator in Joe Brady who loves to run the ball. So fortunately, though, Keon Coleman is the kind of wide receiver who can pop on a limited number of targets. He's had 7 in each of the last 2 weeks. He had, in week 7, 70 yards and a touchdown. 125 yards and a touch. 125 yards against the Titans in week 7. 70 yards and a touchdown last week against Seattle. So even with 7 targets, not a big target total, he has come through in each of the last 2 weeks. Boomer best flex option, though, I think, just because we can't really count on him being seriously involved. Maybe he makes a big play or two, but, he's not going to get double-digit targets. It's just not how this offense works.
Erickson?
I think I'm a little more optimistic about Keon Coleman this week. I'm not really looking at the matchup per se. It's just, this is a rookie who was drafted at the top of the second round that is breaking out before our eyes. Well, why aren't we more excited about Keon Coleman? Yeah, I get that there's other targets in this offense, but who's the quarterback? It's Josh Allen. Like, he can get by on maybe not as much volume as some of these other wide receivers. You look at what he's done over the basically through the first 8 weeks of the season, his receiving yards over expectation. 3rd most by rookie wide receiver, trailing only Jamar Chase and Justin Jefferson. That's the bucket of what he's done through 8 weeks of the NFL season, and we're kind of ranking him wide receiver 3. I feel like we need to be buying into what we're seeing in this breakout with Keon Coleman because Fitz said it. He looks great. Like, he is making contested catches in the red zone. So yeah, if he only gets 5 targets, well, I think that half of those are going to come in the end zone. So he can come down with a touchdown. He's shown the big play ability. He has chemistry with Josh Allen more so than Amari Cooper, who's still new to the team. So I think that, yes, the raw target volume hasn't really been there for him, but the high value opportunities. He's the air yards leader the last 2 weeks, red zone target leader the last 2 weeks, and he still has a 22% target share, which is still really good. And I think one of the things to point out about his role, it's changed a little bit. Josh Allen is now looking for him on 3rd downs. That's something that was not the case in the beginning of the season. So you're starting to see the trust with Josh Allen. And if I have to push my chips on a receiver that's attached to Josh Allen, like that's the bet I'm making, I feel like it's going to work out for you most times. So I like Keon Coleman. Somebody asked me in Discord, Amari Cooper or Keon Coleman. And I had Cooper ranked ahead of him just because, he's the veteran. But then I thought about it and like, I don't think I would rather start Amari Cooper. I mean, both guys have boomer bust potential, but who's shown more the last 2 weeks when both guys have been playing in the same offense? It's been Keon Coleman. So again, I think both guys have, like Fitz said, I think boomer bust is the right way to approach it. But this rookie's breaking out and I don't want to miss it. So I'm going to chase these booms.
Fitz, one other waiver wire ad. Since I didn't have any good running backs, I wanted to throw a quarterback in here. And Jameis Winston, we already kind of talked about that offense a bit with Cedric Tillman, was awesome against the Ravens. Again, an appealing matchup, against that beat up Baltimore defense. But Jameis looked good. There's talent on the offense around him if he plays at a decent level. Like even if People were saying the whole time, like, if Deshaun Watson was just an average quarterback, this team would be a playoff contender. And, I think Jameis can at least give them average quarterback play. So what do you make of him starting in week 9 in that Chargers matchup?
Oh, I am in. His ECR is QB 18. I've got him QB 9. So Jameis Jameis is just going to let it rip, man. So 41 pass attempts last week in his first start of the season, and Jameis throws it aggressively downfield. Here's an interesting stat from our good friend Jacob Gibbs of CBS. Jameis had 275 catchable air yards against the Ravens last week. The previous high in catchable air yards for any quarterback this season, Brock Purdy with 213. And only 2 other quarterbacks have produced 200 or more catchable air yards in a game this season, Jordan Love and Dak Prescott. So I realize the matchup with the Chargers is not great, and there's always a chance Jameis is going to throw multiple interceptions because he is such an aggressive downfield passer. I don't care. I want this dude in my lineup.
And by the way, essentially threw multiple interceptions in this game, even when he was great, that just weren't caught. We don't need to talk anymore about that, though. Erickson, Jameis Winston, where are you ranking him?
Yeah, I'm more in line with where ECR has him, but I mean, I can't say I'm not convinced by Fitz about I got to probably move him up. So I looked at him as a QB streamer. I know I picked him up in a couple of leagues where I had to drop Anthony Richardson. And I mean, we saw this with Joe Flacco last year. The dude just let it rip the rest of the season. It didn't even matter who he played. he just started every single week. So I think we're beginning to see this Browns offense really blossom. And if Winston's out there on your waiver wire, it's still not too late to hop on the bandwagon. I think the Browns win and an upset in this game. If they win, it means they're scoring touchdowns. So yes, the Browns have impending regression because they could never score their team total with Deshaun Watson. Well, they got over their team total last week with Winston, and I think you're going to continue to see that trend over and over and over again. So yeah, I'm going to have to move him up.
Do you don't think, just quickly, Fitz, like this is like a long term, like if you had him in Dynasty, would you be looking to just sell high if you're a rebuilding team, hold on if you're a contending team? Like, what do you make of him like long term? Or is this just like, hey, maybe the back half of the season will be another Joe Flacco?
It's the interceptions, man. You can't live with the interceptions long term. That's why no one is going to go forward with Jameis Winston as their quarterback of the future. Like, he's not going to be anyone's long term plan at QB.
Yeah. All right, Fitz, who is your plant your flag player for week 9?
Well, it's Calvin Ridley, and I'm a little worried now because he has since shown up on the injury report. Didn't practice with the shoulder issue on Wednesday, but in the Titans' first game after trading away DeAndre Hopkins, Ridley had 15 targets, 10 catches, 143 yards. A lot of people have been impatiently waiting for Calvin Ridley to live up to the vast potential he showed early in his career. I am very encouraged that he was hyper-targeted by Mason Rudolph last week with no DeAndre Hopkins in the picture. Optimistic, cautiously optimistic that continues. I don't know, maybe this is my great pumpkin moment. I'll be like Linus in the pumpkin patch, waiting for another 100-yard game for Calvin Ridley. That's fine, man. Just give me my blanket and my flashlight, and I'm good.
Erickson, who's your plant your flag player?
I'm going with Nick Chubb, someone that you were kind of pushing back on me and Fitz last week, Worm, about how you liked him a little bit more. And although he didn't have a monster game in the box score, Joe Pisapia had brought this to me. It was the first game that a running back rushed for 50 yards against the Baltimore Ravens. And it was Nick Chubb that was the running back that did it. So he's already talked to the media earlier this week saying he's starting to feel back to himself again. What else is he going to say? But it's encouraging because you're starting to see it in the box score. Like, he's getting more touches. I mean, he saw almost 20 opportunities in that game, which was going back and forth between a really tough Baltimore Ravens defense. And I talked earlier about how the Browns can score on this Chargers offense. Again, if Fitz believes Winston is going to be putting up top 10 quarterback performance, well, they're going to be moving the ball. They're going to be in red zone opportunities. And what does that mean? Nick Chubb is going to have chances to score touchdowns here. So I look at the Chargers defense. They don't stack the box. They have one of the lowest stack box rates in the NFL, below 10%. So if Winston's getting favorable looks and this offense getting favorable looks to run the football, I think they will. They love Nick Chubb. Like, he is there. Again, if it weren't for Jameis Winston, he would be the talk of the town. Nick Chubb coming back from this major knee injury. So I think that Chubb is an interesting player, someone that I think is viewed as an RB3, but I think maybe he can sneak into the top 24 conversation. You look at the running backs the Chargers have faced. 5 of the last 6 running backs they've faced have exceeded their rushing projection. All of them hit at least 64 rushing yards. Last 2 weeks, they've allowed 5.7 yards per carry, over 100 rushing yards per game to opposing running backs. And Alvin Kamara was like, he looked great against this Chargers run defense because they're not they're not selling out to stop the run. So maybe as they try to avoid Jameis Winston throwing all over them, they try to put more guys in coverage and let those a little bit lighter in the box. So yeah, Nick Chubb for me.
Yeah, I feel like I was just listening back to the tape from last week's show and everything I said about Nick Chubb. Like, the offense is going to be better. He's going to have more scoring opportunities. They love this guy. You're now on board, which I appreciate. I think I mentioned last week, too, that no running back had gotten 50 yards. It might have been on the Friday show, which you weren't on. But I will say, I didn't think Chubb was going to get 50 yards. I thought he was going to get a touchdown, which is why
I mean, he still didn't score that many fantasy points.
Underranked.
If we're being fair, he still didn't score that many fantasy points. But
again, to your point, most rushing yards against her. Now, there again, we've talked about people keep kind of highlighting the secondary in Baltimore being banged up. They did lose Michael Pierce in that game. Travis Jones is banged up. Like, they don't really have interior defensive line depth. Brent Urban also didn't play in this one. He had a issue early, so like. It was a lot easier to run on this Ravens defense than it was earlier in the year. But still, I think impressive, like just the way they have been so far. And also just the usage he's getting in his second game off that injury. To me, that was encouraging for what to expect the rest of the season. So again, I wasn't saying like Nick Chubb should have been ranked as a top 10 guy, but I just, I thought he was a little low and I thought he looked good. And I'm very on board with this as your plant your flag player for week 9. The roller coaster of an NFL season is moving right along, and it promises to be a month full of tricks, treats, and of course, touchdowns. And DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NFL, is the number one place to bet touchdowns, running it in from the one or an 80-yard bomb. We don't care how they score touchdowns. We just want to bet on them. DraftKings heard us and is delivering. Ready to place your first bet? Try betting on something simple like a player to score a touchdown. Go to the DraftKings Sportsbook app and make your pick. There are a lot of interesting matchups in week 9, but the clear best game on the slate is Detroit Green Bay. Huge NFC North implications in this one. So of course, we need to see and make sure that Jordan Love does end up playing. Right now, DraftKings has the Lions laying 3.5 points, and the total in that game is 48.5. Those lines and odds are subject to change, of course, especially as Love's injury status develops leading up into the game. Here's a reason for new customers to do a touchdown dance of their own. Bet $5 to get $200 in bonus bets instantly. Score big with DraftKings Sportsbook, the number one place to bet touchdowns. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app and use code FANTASYPROS. That's code FANTASYPROS for new customers to get $200 in bonus bets when you bet just $5. Only on DraftKings. The crowd is yours. All right, Erickson, let's get into some start-sit player debates. Let's start with Kareem Hunt versus J.K. Dobbins. Who do you like better this week?
I'm going to go with Kareem Hunt. I think it comes down to I like his touchdown equity more. I really like the Browns defense playing at home against the Chargers, who have kind of opened up the passing game a little bit more. They haven't really been as nearly run heavy. Now, that doesn't mean that Dobbins is not involved because he's been seeing a lot of check down targets from Justin Herbert. But I mean, Kareem Hunt has just been a full-blown workhorse, seeing a massive role in the red zone. The Chiefs have one of the highest implied team totals on the slate against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, who have been destroyed by Atlanta Falcons running backs. So for me, I think that I'm just going to roll with Kareem Hunt. And if you got Kareem Hunt, you got to just keep rolling with him until Pacheco comes back, I think. So that's my play.
Yeah, Fitz, what do you think about this one? Dobbins is interesting in that the box score hasn't been quite as strong since those first 2 weeks, but his snap percentage has gone up since then. He had his highest of the season, 82% snaps played in week 8, even as maybe some of the production has fallen off a bit.
Yeah, so he opened with those 200-yard rushing games, although they did come against the Panthers and the Raiders, so they came in 2 pretty easy matchups. In the 5 games since, Dobbins has averaged under 4 yards per carry in every game, at 3.16 yards per carry in that 5-game stretch. So I'm starting to worry if he's running out of steam a little bit. I mean, the first 2 games in that 5-game stretch came against the Steelers and Chiefs, who have really tough run defenses. So it's not like a crime that any running back would have a poor game against them. But J.K. Dobbins had 14 carries for 40 yards against the Cardinals 2 weeks ago. Against the Saints, whose run defense has been a sieve all year, he just had 17 carries for 57 yards. It makes you wonder if we are maybe going to get a full Kamani Vidal unveiling at some point soon. As for Kareem Hunt, look, our guy Debro just on Twitter mentioned that Kareem Hunt has 84 rushing attempts this year and no explosive runs. My response to Debro, who cares? He's had more than 20 rushing attempts in 3 straight games. He scored a touchdown in 3 straight games, 2 touchdowns in one of those games. The guy's getting a lot of work. he's getting all the goal line carries, and the Chiefs wind up doing a lot of business at the goal line every week. Like, yes, I totally agree with Erickson. The touchdown equity is through the roof with Kareem Hunt. Just play him.
So we both are all like Kareem Hunt over J.K. Dobbins this week. Let's go to another running back debate. Bucky Irving versus Nick Chubb. So Erickson, you already kind of talked a bit about Nick Chubb, so I'll let you take this one first as well.
See, now you're putting on me on the spot because now I feel like a hypocrite because I feel like I slightly lean towards Bucky because he's
in my defense, I put together these debates before you picked your player, so you could have just not picked Nick Chubb.
Well, then I'd be doing the people a disservice by not choosing my right flag plan. Again, I mean, I took the low hanging fruit that was rotten last week with Javonte Williams. So that was my penalty, and that was how I enjoyed my week 8. For me, I guess Bucky just looks so good. He just looks so explosive. He had more catches and more targets and receptions than Rachaad White did last week. So yes, I do like Chubb this week, but I think the clock is going to strike midnight on Rachaad White very, very soon. I just don't think he's going to sustain these touchdowns that he's got the last couple of weeks. I know that he's involved in the passing game as well, but he doesn't have any rushing to fall back on. So I know it's even a tough matchup for the Chiefs. I still think Bucky Irving, he just looks so good. So I think that he can do enough on the ground and then be involved in the passing game. And I think that he's still the preferred red zone running back in that backfield. So I have them ranked back to back, but I do give a slight lean towards Bucky, especially in full PPR.
Fitz, what do you think?
If I had to make this call, like this would have me tossing and turning on Saturday nights before the game. I would need that extra hour for daylight savings because I would be losing sleep over this call. So I think I would probably start Chubb, not an easy matchup against the Chargers, but the Browns did give him, he's only been back 2 weeks and he's already getting 16 carries last week. And we know he's going to get the ball when they're inside the 5-yard line. As tough a matchup as the Chargers are for running backs, Bucky Irving is going against the Chiefs. That is a skull and crossbones matchup for running backs. These have been the 2 toughest matchups for running backs all year, the Chiefs and the Chargers. Chiefs are allowing 3.7 fewer fantasy points per game to running backs than the Chargers are. So this is just a hellish matchup. I don't hate Bucky Irving's outlook this week. Like we did see him get involved as a pass catcher last week, 9 carries and a season high 7 catches against the Falcons. Reasonable to expect that the Bucs are going to lean more on their running backs without Mike Evans and Chris Godwin. And as Erickson mentioned, like Bucky has just looked terrific this season. So really tough call, very slight lean toward Chubb.
They are back-to-back in ECR, for what it's worth, RB27 and RB28 in half PPR across the industry. So it's a very close one. Is it daylight savings time this weekend? Is that
yes.
Did you say that? I did not know that. That's this is when we gain an hour of sleep though, right?
Correct.
Spring forward, fall back. Okay, so it's not so bad. All right, let's go to some wide receiver debates. Amari Cooper versus Darnell Mooney. Fitz, we'll start with you on this one.
Yeah, another really close call, but I'm going to go with the guy who's just the better player, the guy with the longer track record of success, the guy tied to the better quarterback. Give me Amari Cooper. It's weird that Cooper gave us 4 catches for 66 yards and a touchdown on 5 targets in his first game on just a 33% snap share, and then had this pullback last week when his snap share rose to 50%. 1 catch, 3 yards. I do think he'll probably get up to like 70%, 75% with his snap share this week. So, yeah, I mean, better quarterback and better player. I mean, I like Darnell Mooney. This is a close call, but I'm going with Amari.
What do you think, Erickson?
I like Mooney. I like the game environment more between Dallas and Atlanta. In a dome. Maybe Dallas can do something offensively to push the Kirk Cousins-led offense. I know that Mooney's not playing the Buccaneers, who he's basically had 80% of his production against this season. But, I mean, Mooney's looked really good in this offense, and he's a part of it. He's not just a sub piece to a Drake London or a Kyle Pitts. Like, he is involved. He's on the field on every single snap. And if this game shoots out, I think Mooney could be a big part of it. And I think, like Cooper, he has a lot of upside. Again, he can take a 80-yard pass to the house, just like Cooper can. So I think right now we've just seen a little bit more consistency from Darnell Mooney than Amari Cooper. Again, obviously he's on a new team, so it's tough, but I like Mooney the most.
This is another one where ECR has them back-to-back, by the way. Wide receiver 22, Darnell Mooney. Wide receiver 23, Amari Cooper. That's, again, in half PPR rankings. How about another one? Khalil Shakir. So you got another Bills receiver we're talking about here. Versus Josh Downs. Erickson, we'll start with you this time.
Josh Downs. Again, I like Shakir, but it's clearly Josh Downs. You have to start Josh Downs this week. I don't know how more I can tell. I guess I can present some numbers if that's something that we will be entertained by. So Josh Downs target rate this season, 33%, 4th in the NFL since week 3, 26% target share, 10th overall in the NFL. With Joe Flacco, averaging over 19 PPR points per game. And he's facing the Vikings defense, who has allowed top 5 in terms of fantasy points to wide receivers this season. He is the target leader in this offense. And I'm not saying that's because Michael Pittman is washed in any way. Michael Pittman, again, a couple weeks ago, Pittman was going to go on injured reserve. So I don't know if he's 100% healthy. I think that he's gutting it out with this back injury. So I don't think that he's at 100%, but Josh Downs is benefiting from that in the biggest way because he's seeing a boatload of targets. He's looked great. He should have had 2 touchdowns last week with Anthony. I mean, he was producing with Anthony Richardson, right? So he was making highlight catches. So yes, Shakir has been so consistent and efficient, but I think the upside play is still with Josh Downs because, again, we're talking about a lot of Bills receivers this week. Who's going to want to be to pop off? I think Shakir has the highest floor, but maybe Cooper or Coleman has a higher ceiling. So I'm going to go with Josh Downs because I think he has a floor and ceiling combination that I like a lot.
This is one where these guys were actually a lot closer when I was putting the outline together just yesterday. And then, ECR has kind of started to catch up to the news about Joe Flacco and everything. And now Josh Downs is actually a handful of spots higher. Shakir's wide receiver 25. Downs is inside the top 20. He's wide receiver 19 in ECR as of right now. Fitz, Downs, or Shakir? Who do you have higher this week?
Oh, interesting battle of 2 guys for whom enthusiasm has maybe gotten to the irrational level in the fantasy community. And I'm getting a dose of that with Erickson here. I mean, you'll have to excuse me for not getting the memo about Josh Downs' superstardom, the guy who just had his second 100-yard game of his career and has 5 career touchdowns in 23 career games. I like Josh Downs. I mean, he is a smooth moving slot receiver. I think he's going to be a really solid player for the foreseeable future, but I'm not ready to, think that he's going to be the next Chris Godwin yet. I'm just not there. And Shakir, 9 catches for 107 yards against the Seahawks last week on 10 targets, but all of those numbers were season highs. His 10 targets, 9 catches, 107 receiving yards. Hasn't had more than 7 targets or 72 yards in any other game this season, and he's competing for targets with Amari Cooper, Keon Coleman, Dalton Kincaid. I do love me some Shakir, though. He is very efficient. He has a ridiculous 94.7% catch rate this year, averaging 11.1 yards per target. And that's kind of carried over from last year when he was really efficient. So, yeah, man, I just all these questions I'm getting on Twitter and Discord this week are just everyone is over the moon about Josh Downs. He's wide receiver 18 in ECR right now. I'm just not there yet. And I get that the quarterback change is reason to be more enthusiastic about these Colts receivers, all of them, not just Downs, but Pittman, even Alec Pierce, I think is borderline flex worthy. But that's the thing. Michael Pittman's ECR is wide receiver 32. We're totally convinced Josh Downs is way more valuable than Michael Pittman. I'm not there yet. And maybe you're right, Erickson. Maybe Pittman is banged up and playing at much less than 100%, but I am not on board with all the Josh Downs enthusiasm. Certainly playable. I think you probably are starting him this week, but if I had this choice, I think I would play Shakir.
Please don't tell me that this is Dontavian Wicks 2.0 all over again.
I like him, man. I don't see him as a top 20 receiver this week.
I think that's reasonable to say that maybe wide receiver, 18, 19 is too high in terms of ECR. But it does seem like it's been pretty close to black and white this season of if Joe Flacco is a starting quarterback, it's probably been a smart decision to play Josh Downs more often than not. And when he's not the starting quarterback, more often than not, it hasn't been that smart decision. So now that Flacco's starting, I mean, that you didn't really dive too deep into it, Fitz, but I am somewhat worried about this matchup too. We were talking a bit before the show, On the one hand, maybe it's a good thing Anthony Richardson isn't going to kind of get thrown to the wolves, so to speak, against this Vikings defense. But on the other hand, Joe Flacco is a statue. He has no mobility whatsoever. And I'd be pretty concerned going up against that Minnesota pass rush.
Yeah, Minnesota's a hard place to play. And I know the Vikings have been generous to opposing wide receivers, but I don't think this is going to be an easy matchup for Flacco, with Brian Flores finding ways to dial up pressure, and the Vikings are probably going to be breathing fire after losing 2 straight games. So I want to find a place. I want to find odds on Joe Flacco to throw multiple interceptions in this game.
When I think about my favorite fall activities, there are plenty of fun adventures on the list, but right at the top every fall is going to football games live. As I mentioned last week and earlier in the show, I actually just checked another NFL stadium off my list this past weekend, seeing the Ravens take on the Browns in Cleveland. Obviously, the game did not go the way I wanted it to, but I was really pleasantly surprised by the stadium itself. And we got our tickets using Game Time. Game Time has this new feature called Game Time Picks, which filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats. It makes getting tickets to see your favorite teams play live even easier. The list of my favorite features on the Game Time app is too long to read everything, but here are some standouts for me personally. I love the Game Time Picks curation, obviously, especially since I can use it for not just sports, but concerts, comedy, theater, and more. I also love the all-in pricing, so there are no surprise fees at checkout. There's nothing in the world more infuriating to me than thinking I know what I'm about to spend on a purchase, then getting hit with a surprise fee at the last second. That doesn't happen with Game Time. Plus, I also appreciate the seat views to get a panoramic view from your seat in the app before you commit to buying. Our seat view in Cleveland was awesome, high up near the 50-yard line. So we got these very cool views of the lake on both ends of the stadium. It was actually a kind of a pretty cool spot to be sitting. That was another win for Game Time's seat views. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code FantasyPros for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code FANTASYPROS for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Game Time. All right, guys, let's get into our rapid fire start sit decisions. Another running back here, Rico Dowdle versus Javonte Williams. Fitz, I'll start with you here.
Javonte by a nose. A tough matchup against the Ravens. We've talked about how good they are against the run. But as you have pointed out in the past, Worm, the Ravens do give it up to running backs in the passing game at times. And Javonte is a very involved pass catcher. Dowdle probably the better matchup against the Falcons, but we just haven't gotten much production from the Dallas backfield. And Dowdle's usage has been inconsistent.
We kind of said, Fitz, if Javonte doesn't get it done against Carolina, that we might be more out on him. This is kind of going counter to that because he didn't really get it done against Carolina at all in a very tasty matchup. 17 carries for 44 yards, pretty abysmal. So you're comfortable kind of going back to the well with him?
Well, Dowdle showed up to the stadium last week and was sick and didn't play, so he didn't get it done either. But yeah, I just if you're starting Rico, you're in pretty desperate times. I think it's just I don't want to start any of these Dallas running backs, and who knows if they're going to try to keep Dalvin Cook involved for some reason. I'm kind of out on the Cowboys running backs.
Erickson, what do you think?
Well, if I didn't come up with this great Mike McDaniel costume, I was going to actually show up dressed as Uncle Rico in support of my guy, Rico Dowdle, who's going to take back the RB1 spot because he should have had it, but he had basically his temperature was at 102.4 degrees, exactly what he said. He tried to play. They wouldn't let him play. I'm just going to pretend last week never happened. I don't care that Dalvin Cook was brought up. I saw Dalvin Cook and Ezekiel Elliott play, and they were both horrible. So Rico Dowdle has had one strong game this year, 20 carries against the Pittsburgh Steelers, and he looked pretty good. I think that he's going to get fed in this matchup. They're going to use him. The Falcons are a favorable matchup for running backs, and I think like Javonte, Rico Dowdle is also involved in the passing game. So I know that we're frustrated with Dowdle because he didn't play last week, and he put some managers in a tough spot because it happened so late. So you had to make a quick pivot. But I think that this is a potential breakout spot for Rico Dowdle if he ends up getting the workload, which by all intents and purposes, from the coach speak, from Mike McCarthy talking about what we've seen from the other Dallas Cowboys running backs, it should be. So again, I'm sick of this Javonte inconsistency. You can't trust him. It doesn't matter what matchup it is. He's up and down. Give me Dowdle.
All right, how about our wide receiver here? Courtland Sutton, sticking with that Denver game, versus Jakobi Meyers. Erickson, we'll start with you this time.
I like both guys, kind of in that wide receiver 3 range. I think that I'm cool with just the Meyers consistency, that what he's been able to do. The Bengals defense has been really bad against number 2 receivers. And again, I think Meyers is still the number 2 on this team behind Brock Bowers. So I think Myers is just going to be consistent. He's going to have 5 catches. He's going to go over 50 yards. And I'm cool with that, especially in a full PPR. Whereas Sutton, you're taking a little bit more risk. I know that the matchup is good against the Baltimore Ravens. We saw a big body receiver like Cedric Tillman obviously take advantage of some of these smaller Ravens corners, but it still is Bo Nix on the road in Baltimore, where you could see, okay, things could go haywire potentially. And sometimes Bo Nix isn't the most accurate quarterback when he's not playing the Carolina Panthers. So that does concern me. I think Sutton has the higher ceiling for sure. So if you're aiming for, I need to score maximum amount of points, I think Sutton is the play. But in full PPR, or you need more of a floor play, I'm just going to take Jakobi, who's been basically very, very consistent since their team has basically not had Davante Adams.
It does seem like the Ravens secondary is maybe going to be healthier this week than it was last week. Normally I would be all over Sutton in this one. I would like rookie quarterbacks in Baltimore against John Harbaugh tend to struggle pretty mightily. So that is kind of in the back of my mind as getting me away from Sutton a bit. Everything else points to Sutton, in my opinion. Fitz, what do you think about this one? Courtland Sutton or Jakobi Myers?
Oh, give me the guy going up against the Ravens pass defense. It's a sieve. Yeah. Worm, have you watched the Baltimore Ravens play football lately? No, just kidding. So I actually think Erickson framed this pretty well as far as the sort of risk reward outlooks for these two guys. And maybe you let that sort of determine who you start if you're making this decision. If you're a favorite, maybe you want to go with Jakobi Myers, who probably does have the sturdier floor here. He's going to get somewhere in the range of 7 to 10 targets, you would think. And, good chance of getting you the 50 yards Erickson is talking about. Sutton, a little more boom or bust. I mean, we've seen games where, that Saints game where he didn't get a single target, even though the Broncos passing game was clicking that night. But, I mean, he does have a much higher ceiling, I think. So maybe if you're a little bit of an underdog and you need to land a haymaker to win, like Sutton is the guy you're going to go with here.
If you're actually making this decision, I would make it based on who is actually playing for the Ravens in this one. If Marlon Humphrey, who was limited in practice on Wednesday, and Nate Wiggins, who was also limited in practice on Wednesday, if they're both back, I think I would get away from Sutton. But if they're both out or still seem pretty limited, or if just one was out, then I think I'd be wanting to play Sutton against this defense for sure. Let's do some flex debates here. How about Tank Bigsby against DJ Moore? Fitz, what do you think about that one?
DJ Moore, I know he's been disappointing. He has had under 30 receiving yards in 3 of his last 4 games, but there are no doubts that Moore is an excellent player, and the matchup against the Cardinals is a really good one. I think you just have to play him. Tank Bigsby is proving that he's a really good runner, but I just can never feel entirely comfortable with him in my starting lineup playing on a bad team when he is a running back who doesn't catch passes. Like if they fall behind by multiple scores, the floor could just drop out from Tank Bigsby because they're going to have to throw to catch up, and Bigsby just isn't involved in the passing game. And that could well happen with the injury-depleted Jaguars going into Philadelphia to play the Eagles, who have allowed the 8th fewest rushing yards to running back. So I would play DJ Moore here.
Who do you prefer, Erickson?
Yeah, I agree. DJ Moore. I know that he's been disappointing, but he's a boom or bust guy, and it's a favorable matchup. I think that this is a potential boom spot for him, and there's a chance that ETN comes back. And to Fitz's point about Tank Bigsby, when they've used him in the passing game, he's looked bad. That's the other issue too, where he's dropping passes. It's going off of his face mask. Like they're setting up screens for him, but it's not turning out into big plays. So as much as we'd like to say, hey, maybe they'll get him more involved in the receiving game, he's not proving that he necessarily deserves those touches. Again, as a rusher, he's been very effective this year, but I think that ETN goes back to at least that pass catching role if he plays. And Doug Peterson said earlier this week that he's optimistic that ETN will play, but he said that before. But either way, Dearness Johnson would also be in that role potentially.
Erickson, sticking with you, Rachaad White or Calvin Ridley this week?
I'm going to go with Calvin Ridley. I think that he is the ceiling play here, and I like chasing ceiling in my flex. I said earlier, I think that this is when the clock strikes midnight for Rachaad White. I don't know if he can continue to run as hot on these receiving touchdowns. Maybe he can, but this matchup against the Chiefs is absolutely brutal for running backs for the Buccaneers, especially if he's not looking nearly as great as Bucky Irving. I don't know what the touch floor for Rachaad White is in. With Calvin Ridley, look, he's going to get man-to-man coverage against Christian Gonzalez. So if he's ready to win, then he can have a monster game here. And if Mason Rudolph is going to hyper-target him again, then he's going to have a lot of opportunities. So I think really he's much more boom or bust, because if he just gets outplayed by Gonzalez, then he's going to not play very well. He's not going to put up production. But it only takes one for him to beat Christian Gonzalez man-to-man, and you've got an 80-yard touchdown on your hands. So I think I'm going to chase the ceiling with Calvin Ridley.
Fitz?
Ridley. I have set up my encampment in the pumpkin patch, and I ain't leaving until the great pumpkin Calvin Ridley shows up.
All right, Fitz. How about Alexander Mattison or Michael Pittman Jr.?
Mattison. Over the month of October, Mattison has averaged 16.5 carries, 3.8 catches, and 20.3 touches a game. The usage has been terrific. It hasn't necessarily led to a lot of fantasy points over the last month, but he does have a pretty good matchup against the Bengals, whose run defense ranks 25th in DVOA. When we were talking about Downs earlier, that was the other thing where you mentioned it. I don't like this matchup in Minnesota for the Colts very much. I have kind of a bad vibe on the Colts offense for this week, which means Flacco's probably going to throw for 450 yards and 5 touchdowns. But man, I kind of want to stay away from the Colts passing game this week.
Erickson.
I think it's kind of like a floor ceiling play. So Madison as a running back, I think the touches are secure with him with the floor. So the thing with Pittman, I do kind of worry about this injury thing with him. He hasn't looked necessarily right. Even last week, he had 6 targets, he had 1 catch, right? So if he's not 100% healthy, if Downs is the guy that's seeing more targets, then you could see Pittman potentially not delivering, even in a matchup that looks good on paper. But as you guys have outlined, there are a couple potential holes against Brian Flores in this defense on the road. So I think Alexander Mattison, again, good matchup against the Bengals. Madison has been scoring touchdowns at a pretty solid rate. He couldn't find the end zone at all last year, and now he can't stop finding the end zone this year. So I know his yards per carry was really bad last week, but that's because half of his carries are coming at the 5-yard line. So you're never going to have a strong yards per carry. And I think that goes back to the Kareem Hunt point you brought up, Fitz, where, he doesn't have any explosive runs because, he's 5 yards away from the end zone every time he runs the ball, so he can't get any explosive runs. So, I think it's probably going to be Madison for me as well.
Last flex one, Xavier Worthy or Cade Otton. And Fitz, you have talked in the past about how you are not a start tight ends in the flex spot type of guy, but Otton has looked so good and obviously has such a clear path to targets right now that I wanted to throw in a question with him included. So Cade Otton or Xavier Worthy, Fitz?
Yeah, I'll toss that personal guideline out the window for this one and go with Cade Otton. I mean, for better or worse, he is the Buccaneers' top pass catcher now. And Xavier Worthy has gone over 50 receiving yards once this season. So Cade Otton.
Erickson.
I put myself in Fitz's mindset for this question because I love Xavier Worthy, but I was like, what would Fitz do? As the higher ranked FantasyPros analyst, he would say Cade Otton. So I'm also going to say Cade Otton.
All right, let's go to a quarterback here. Bo Nix versus my guy as Sean McVay. Again, I still can't do the impression. Matthew Stafford. Stafford or Nix? Erickson, who do you like?
Well, can you tell me, are you going to let Stafford throw the ball in the red zone, or are you going to just give it to Kyren Williams? Because that's ultimately what's going to determine this. I think Stafford is just way safer. I think both guys have good matchups, but look, there's always a chance that Bo Nix, in terms of back into a pumpkin as a rookie quarterback playing on the road against Baltimore, if their defense gets healthier. I know Nix has the rushing that Stafford doesn't have, but with Stafford, with all of his weapons back, I feel like he has such a high floor. His passing yardage is always going to be there. He's going to throw for 230 yards at least, and then he's going to throw a couple touchdowns as long as Kyren doesn't score 3 rushing touchdowns. So I have them ranked back-to-back. I think both guys are viable this week, but I think I'm going to take the safe route with Stafford.
Yeah, Nix has regularly been like a very viable starting fantasy quarterback, but I worry about him in this one. Even, again, with the state of the Ravens defense, I don't know that they're going to let him run the way he has been. And I don't know that I feel pretty confident that he's not going to pass enough to be ahead of somebody like Stafford, who now gets his full allotment of receivers back. So I'm with you on Stafford. Fitz, do you agree? Make it a clean sweep, or do you like Bo Nix?
No, clean sweep. And I am echoing your point on this, Worm. I know the matchup against the Ravens looks good. Baltimore's given up the 3rd most fantasy points to quarterbacks, but man, I have a hard time getting my head around the idea of a rookie quarterback going into Baltimore and that somehow being a good matchup for him. I just don't buy that, even though Bo Nix has actually been QB4 in fantasy points per game since week 5. He's been terrific lately, but look, man, I realize this is not your typical Baltimore Ravens defense. Terrell Suggs and Ed Reed are not going to be playing this weekend, but still, man, Baltimore's a really tough place for a rookie QB to play. And Stafford is he is going to give you a safe floor and QB1 upside as long as he has both Cooper Kupp and Puka Nacua at his disposal. And oh, by the way, Devon Witherspoon didn't practice for Seattle on Wednesday. If he doesn't play, Stafford could really light it up this week.
Yeah, and I tend to, not that they never do anything against the Ravens, but again, a team like the Ravens or the Eagles, a team that faces a mobile quarterback in practice every day, I tend to like that defense going up against other mobile quarterbacks. They're not going to be surprised by anything they see. Like, obviously, Bo Nix is not the rusher that Lamar is, so like I just tend to go into those matchups with a bit more confidence than I would for a defense that doesn't face it every day. How about a tight end here? Mark Andrews or Tucker Kraft? I picked these two because I feel like every single week this season, I have asked about one of these guys. It's either been Andrews versus someone or Tucker Kraft versus someone. And so I figured, why not put them together, head to head against each other? Obviously, Kraft, there's a bit of, question marks surrounding the quarterback play that he's going to have this week going up against the Lions. Mark Andrews has been catching touchdowns lately at a really encouraging rate, but hasn't been getting the yardage or the usage. They now have added Deontay Johnson. We'll see what he does in week 1 and what that means for Andrews. These guys are also back-to-back, tight end 11, tight end 12. Most of the guys ahead of them, I think, were starting. Most behind, I think, are question marks. So I figured, why not throw kind of the two stars of this section this season against each other? Erickson, Mark Andrews, or Tucker Kraft this week?
I think it's Tucker Kraft. I think he's just been more consistent throughout the entire season. The only way I would switch off it is if Malik Willis is starting quarterback for the Packers.
Kraft is tight end 12 in ECR, by the way. Andrews is 11. So like I said, they are back-to-back. Fitz, what do you think?
Yeah, Erickson nailed it. Kraft is a pretty easy call if Love plays. But as of now, I'm ranking Kraft as if Love is not going to play. I've got him at like tight end 17. Like if Love doesn't play and it's Malik Willis, I think you have to play Andrews.
We've got a special offer for you all. Unlock a month of Betting Pros Premium for free. Download the Betting Pros app today. Use promo code FPFREE. Again, that's code FPFREE. Get access to tools like the Same Game Parlay tool, the Prop Bet Analyzer, and the Prize Picks Prop Bet Cheat Sheet. Don't miss out. Try it free for 1 month now. Only available on iOS. All right, guys, we will wrap up with our touchdown calls contest. Fitz, you are on running backs this week.
I think the Vikings are going to take the Colts to the woodshed this weekend, so Aaron Jones gets into the end zone.
I'm on the other side of this game. I'm going to take Josh Downs and spit in the face of Fitz and say, you are wrong. It is a Josh Downs.
Everyone got this Josh Downs superstar memo except me. So,
well, I also like fax machine. Come on, Boomer.
I do think he's maybe a touch overranked in ECR. Having said that, if Joe Flacco's playing, I want to have Josh Downs in my lineups, and I didn't want to pick an obvious guy. So maybe this was an obvious guy according to ECR, but in my mind, it was a good pick here. So Aaron Jones at running back, Josh Downs at receiver. Erickson, who do you have at tight end?
I didn't even realize we all picked guys from the same game. TJ Hawkinson.
I didn't realize that till right now too.
TJ Hawkinson, first game back. The coach has said he's not going to be on a snap count, so who knows if that's real or not, but Colts allowing the second most catches to tight ends this season, third most touchdowns. I'm back in the Hawks nest, baby. TJ Hawkinson, touchdown.
So we'll be paying very close attention to that game and seeing how we do in that one.
Three touchdown parlay action, boys.
Ooh, I wonder what the odds would be on that. Probably pretty decent. Quick reminder, everybody, to say goodbye to Start Sit Dilemmas with Fantasy Pros Start Sit Assistant. Within seconds, you'll know exactly who to play for optimal results each and every week. Leveraging insights from numerous experts, the Start Sit Assistant aligns your lineup decisions with the top minds in fantasy football, giving you a competitive edge. Maximize your lineup's potential with just a few clicks. Head to fantasypros.com/myplaybook and make winning decisions in no time. Guys, we'll get out of here on your favorite Halloween/scary movie. Erickson, what is it?
Hocus Pocus.
Hocus Pocus. I had a feeling that's where you were going to go with it. Fitz?
It's a hit.
Got to go with the original Halloween. John Carpenter, Michael Myers.
I am not a horror movie guy, but I do really like Scream. So I'll go with the first Scream from 1996, I believe. All right, we'll wrap up there. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. Enjoy Halloween. Enjoy Week 9. And hopefully you make some good decisions here this week. For Fitz and Erickson, for Dan Quinn and Mike McDaniel, I'm Sean McVay. And we'll see you again next time.